Welcome to our Insight series on organizational well-being. Our question for this week is, what are the three major ways of doing employee wellness programming? Number 10. In answering the question, what are the three major ways of doing employee wellness programming, we essentially have the feel-good wellness model, the traditional wellness program model, and the results-driven wellness program model. First, I'd like to say that these are not pure archetypes. They actually occur in hybrid forms so that you can move from one to the next and you may be in between these various models. Also, there's the expectation that they will evolve over time. And that's an important reality in considering how you're planning and how your work goes in implementing and designing your wellness program. Secondly, each of the three program models has a range of typical targets, behavioral targets, and interventions, which are intended to change those behavioral activities. And those are going to depend on the goals that management sets for the program and your budgetary resources. The third thing is that the cost of the program model you choose, the difficulty of implementing it, and the effectiveness that it brings about in terms of making tangible changes and results in health improvement and an economic return, employee satisfaction, other kinds of dimensions, are going to move from the left to the right. So as you have the feel-good model, it's a low-cost model. It's primarily morale oriented, so it's helping people feel better about their employer and about their company. The traditional model is activity oriented. So we essentially put a lot of activities out and hope all the right people come down and do the right activities. The results driven is much more of a results oriented model that uses a logic framework where we are adjusting the program to get the results that we want. Now, again, the cost, difficulty, and effectiveness all increase as you move from the left to the right. The fourth thing I want to start with is to say that the critical thing is that the goals of your management for the wellness program are aligned with the choice of the model that you are using. So if those are not in alignment, then you are in jeopardy because ultimately your management will likely say this is not producing the results that we want it to produce. Now let's look at the main features of each strategy or program model. Let's start with the feel good, and what you see here is essentially a focus that goes across the main features box for each of the models. Our feel good model has the following main features. It's fun activity. It's usually getting people together and they enjoy it. It has very little risk reduction, very little high risk focus. So we don't work with people with multiple health risks, but we're essentially just offering fun activities around wellness. It usually is not very health cost management oriented. So it's not really helping us, for instance, use our benefits more wisely, be better health consumers, handle medical self-care kinds of issues. It's usually all voluntary. It usually is site-based only, so we're not necessarily offering much in the way of a virtual access to programs for remotely located staff and family members. It usually has limited personalization and also minimal incentives. So we tend to have very minor minimal incentives in this model. And very few spouses get served by the program, and we have very little evaluation going on. It is a morale-oriented approach, so it's basically helping people feel better about their organization, their company, their employer, and it doesn't really do a lot for the health improvement or economic return for the population. When we move to the traditional model, we go down each of the features, which are similar, is we begin to say that it is mostly health focus. So we tend to be focused on physical health, mental health, perhaps financial health. It has some risk reduction activities, so we may be working on things like cholesterol or blood pressure. It has a little high risk focus, so we may do some special things for those people with multiple health risks. And we oftentimes do screening and biometric screening and coaching around some of those specific issues. Sometimes there's a limited health cost management orientation to it, that program, that type of program model. It usually is all voluntary. There usually is a site-based focus again on it, weak personalization, and fairly modest incentives. So we start to add a little more to the incentive pool or the incentive pot, and we use a little more money perhaps to purchase things that might be of value or perceived to be of value by employees. And then few spouses served again, and weak evaluation. The traditional activity-oriented wellness model has actually a very weak evaluation potential because we're not collecting a lot of baseline information. We're not monitoring, for instance, a number of biometric measures or HRA kinds of indicators or analytics. When we move to the results-driven wellness model, which is the third kind of model, we add productivity to our focus, so we begin to work on things like presenteeism and the way in which health is affecting the productivity of our workforce. We get a much stronger risk reduction orientation. We're monitoring and looking at that more deeply. We may have a very strong high risk focus, so we start to work with the people that are at the highest risk of having medical problems and health problems. We start to see a much stronger health cost management orientation. So we're working on medical self-care. We're looking at benefit design. We're working with perhaps a premium reduction incentive around wellness and wellness accomplishments. We have some required activity, and oftentimes that required activity is an orientation to our wellness program as being a mandatory activity, so that people find out why we're doing the wellness program and what's in it for them. Site and virtual both, so we begin to address more of the remote employee needs and family needs. Strongly personal in nature, so we try to get really as personal as we can in being able to customize programs and to personalize them. We begin to get major incentives. This is where we get into the $600 to maybe $1,200 of reduced premium contribution on our health plan benefits for involvement in wellness. And we begin to see many more spouses served, and we usually end up with more rigorous evaluation. And again, this last model, the third model, is really what we call a results-oriented model. That's why we call it, obviously, the results-driven wellness model. Now, these are strategies, wellness strategies. They're also called program models. And they, in fact, are very important in setting expectations for what our program is to accomplish. In summary, there are at least three major ways of doing employee wellness programming, and each of the three have very different administrative, resource requirements, and outcomes. For more information on this topic, put the following search strings into your web browser. Types of employee wellness programs. You can use the three models that we've outlined for you: feel-good, traditional, and results-driven wellness programs. You can also use the search string ways of doing employee wellness programming. All of these should provide you with some additional resources and knowledge and information about this very important topic. Next week, we will address the question, what does a typical feel-good wellness program look like? For more information, please visit our website at www.chapmaninstitute.com and try out our search engine.